The Mystery of Lake Nyos. This is a true story, and it remains one of the most bizarre and terrifying natural disasters in modern human history. In 1986, deep in the remote, lush mountains of Cameroon, Africa, villagers from several bustling settlements mysteriously died overnight. It was not just the humans who perished. Livestock, poultry, insects, and even birds flying in the sky did not survive the night. The following morning, the nearby Lake Nyos became the center of this terrifying enigma. Overnight, its famously clear, crystal blue water had turned a bizarre, murky blood red. What invisible force could silently wipe out thousands of lives in a matter of hours without leaving a single physical wound? In the Bamenda Plateau of northwestern Cameroon lies a volcanic crater lake named Nyos. Local folklore had long warned that evil spirits dwelled within the lake, demanding respect and silence from anyone who approached its shores. Despite these dark legends, the lake was a place of breathtaking beauty. Although its surface area is very small, only 1.58 square kilometers, its average depth is astonishing, plunging over 200 meters into the earth. Surrounded by steep, dramatic cliffs on its east, west, and south sides, the lake featured vibrant green grass and pristine water. Only the northern side has a lower terrain with a natural spillway that allows water to flow down into a sweeping valley, eventually joining the Katsina River. Around this river, in the fertile valley below, were numerous farming villages, including a prosperous community named Subum. In Subum lived a young man in his early 20s named Ephraim. He came from a wealthy, tight-knit family of 21 people who owned a successful cattle farm halfway up the surrounding mountains. To protect their valuable herd from predators and thieves, the family built a small mud brick hut on the hillside where the men would take turns standing guard overnight. On August 21, 1986, it was Ephraim's turn to watch the herd. He brought 4 of his younger siblings along with him to the hillside hut. At around 9:30 p.m., as he was preparing for bed, he heard a deep, rumbling sound echoing from outside. He stepped out into the pitch-black night, felt a gentle mountain breeze rustling the leaves, and assumed it was just distant thunder before going back to sleep. The African night is usually filled with the sounds of crickets and wildlife, but shortly after midnight, an eerie, absolute silence fell over the mountain. Ephraim woke up to a foul smell resembling rotten eggs and sulfur. Feeling a bit nauseous, he slightly opened the window for ventilation and went back to sleep, completely unaware of the apocalypse unfolding in the valley below. The next morning, Ephraim woke up feeling dizzy, extremely fatigued and sick to his stomach. Stepping outside to get some fresh air, he looked down the valley and was shocked by the sight. Lake Nyos in the distance had completely transformed. It had turned a sickening blood red and was covered in a pale, dense white mist, looking like a terrifying pool of blood. Turning toward his farm, he realized that about 20 of his cattle, nearly a third of the herd, were lying dead on the lower slopes. Strangely, there was not a single wound on them, and there were no flies buzzing around the carcasses because the flies were dead too. Panicking, he rushed down the mountain path to his village to warn his family, only to find a scene straight out of a nightmare. The village paths were littered with the dead bodies of people, chickens, ducks, cats, and dogs. Inside his home, he found his parents, his brothers, and his beloved wife all dead in their beds. Aside from him and the 4 siblings who stayed on the elevated mountain, all 16 members of his household in the village had perished. Exploring further, he saw neighbors frozen in time. Some had collapsed near their doors, while others died sitting by their cooking fires. The victims had no physical injuries, no signs of bleeding. Their expressions were peaceful, and there were no signs of a struggle. A terrified and heartbroken Ephraim fell to his knees, truly believing it was a divine punishment from the gods. Searching the neighboring houses in a desperate daze, Ephraim found nothing but dead bodies and absolute silence. Finally, he heard a faint crashing sound and discovered his friend Joseph crawling weakly on the floor. Sweating heavily, pale, and struggling to breathe, Joseph eventually caught his breath and explained what he remembered. While weaving a mat the night before, he smelled a strong, overpowering odor of rotten eggs. When he stood up to close the window, he immediately became dizzy, the room spun, and he passed out cold. Realizing the foul smell was connected to this mass death, Ephraim and Joseph scoured the area and gathered the dozen or so confused, grieving survivors they could find. They knew they needed the authorities immediately. They decided to send Joseph, the only person with a working motorcycle, to the town of Wum, 40 kilometers away, to seek help from the police. Riding through the valley to Wum, Joseph witnessed the true scale of the devastation. The surrounding villages had suffered the exact same horrific fate, with bodies scattered everywhere along the roads and inside homes. At the police station, the chief initially thought Joseph was drunk, traumatized, and talking nonsense. However, after sending a skeptical subordinate to verify the claims, the pale-faced officer returned an hour later to confirm the unimaginable mass death. The incident was immediately reported up the chain of command, eventually reaching the president of Cameroon, who dispatched the military, medical teams, and scientific researchers to Lake Nyos. The international community also responded rapidly, with France, Switzerland, and the United States sending disaster relief and scientific teams. Medical teams initially suspected an outbreak of anthrax or a biological weapon, but autopsies revealed no toxins, viruses, or bacteria. All victims shared a single terrifying cause of death: asphyxiation. They had simply been deprived of oxygen. Meanwhile, researchers testing the lake water made a massive breakthrough. The water contained a lethally high concentration of carbon dioxide. To understand what happened, scientists had to look deep underground. Lake Nyos is an active volcanic lake sitting directly above a massive magma chamber. As the magma cools miles beneath the Earth, it continuously produces large amounts of carbon dioxide gas. This gas seeps up through microscopic geological cracks and dissolves into the cold groundwater at the bottom of the lake. Over decades, the incredibly deep lake accumulated billions of gallons of CO2. The red color of the lake was also explained by this volcanic activity. Highly acidic hot springs at the bottom dissolved ferrous iron from the basalt rocks of the crater. The lake was highly stratified into two distinct layers: a top layer of normal, fresh rainwater and a bottom layer of red, highly pressurized, CO2-saturated water. Because the lake was so deep and calm, these layers never mixed. They existed in a very fragile, ticking time bomb balance. That delicate balance was violently shattered on the night of August 21st. The deep rumbling sound Ephraim heard was a landslide. A massive rock from the surrounding cliffs had detached and crashed into the lake. This disruption caused the heavy, CO2-rich bottom water to surge upward to the surface. The sudden drop in water pressure triggered what scientists call a limnic eruption, an explosive release of dissolved gas. It was exactly like uncorking a violently shaken bottle of champagne, but on an apocalyptic scale. An estimated 120 million cubic meters of CO2 erupted instantly, creating a terrifying water column and tsunami that surged up to 100 meters high. Because carbon dioxide is 1.5 times heavier than normal air, it didn't float up into the atmosphere. Instead, it formed a massive, invisible cloud of death that cascaded over the crater rim and flowed down into the valleys at 50 kilometers per hour. Ephraim survived because he was elevated on the mountain and there was a breeze that blew the gas away from his hut. But the sleeping villagers in the valleys below had no chance. The dense gas hugged the ground, completely displacing the oxygen in the air. The disaster wiped out 7 or 8 villages within a 25-kilometer radius, killing 1,746 people, injuring 845, and killing over 3,500 livestock, along with all local wildlife and insects. Tragically, years prior to the incident, the Cameroonian government had actually been warned about the dangers of these volcanic lakes. In 1984, a similar but smaller eruption at nearby Lake Nyos killed 37 people, but the alerts were largely ignored, and no evacuation plans or warnings were issued to the locals of Nyos. Following this horrific tragedy, the government and international scientists finally took permanent action to ensure it would never happen again. They engineered a brilliant solution, installing a deep piping system in Lake Nyos that uses a natural siphon effect to continuously draw the CO2-rich water from the bottom of the lake up to the surface. Today, these pipes constantly shoot fountains of water into the air, safely releasing the carbon dioxide into the atmosphere bit by bit. This ingenious mechanism prevents the gas from ever accumulating to dangerous levels again, turning a deadly ticking time bomb back into a peaceful, beautiful lake.